discover whether we have proper regulation in that very important industry. David Hardacre with that report. Jonathan Shier, the Managing Director of the ABC, announced today that he'd appointed a new Director of Television, the respected TV drama and feature film producer Sandra Levy. In isolation, that might be seen as a good appointment, but it follows the dramatic resignation last Friday of another hand-picked Shier appointee, Gail Jarvis. And now Mr Shier is looking for a new Director of Content Development, the job Ms Levy will be leaving. In fact, no fewer than 5 of the 12 directors appointed by Mr Shier have now resigned or been sacked. In the recent budget, the government gave the ABC an additional $70 million odd, spread over the next 4 years for regional programming. But to many inside and outside the ABC, that achievement is small compensation for plunging TV ratings, a merry-go-round of managers at the top, and a dearth of new programs on air. Jonathan Shier joins me now. Jonathan Shier, how much more time do you think you could reasonably expect to demonstrate to the public that you can actually do this job?
Well, Kerry, I think first of all, everyone focuses on television because it's the prime medium, of course. But what we're doing at the moment, for example, in new media, where we've got 10 million hits a week, that is a phenomenal performance, and everyone is very pleased with what we're doing. In radio, we've got new programs. We've got a wonderful new program that reaches regional rural Australia, which I think is appreciated. I think we've got a situation where in television we need to do better. We're conscious we need to do better. Let me just correct, first of all, the fact in relation to the number of people I've appointed who've left. Of those 5 people, 3 of them were in the corporation when I arrived, and they kept doing the jobs that they were doing.
But that was your decision that they keep it because there were many more that you showed the door to.
Well, maybe, Kerry, but what I didn't do is show the doors to those ones as well. And the situation...
But that was your choice to keep them there. In other words, they were handpicked by you to stay there with your trust and faith in them.
Well, it was my decision not to take a decision at that stage that they shouldn't be given a chance to show what they could do in their jobs. And at the end of the day, the decision was to make that change. Let's not duck the point. The fact is that we've made an excellent appointment today of Sandra Levy. I think you've seen on the news that she's committed to producing quality programming. I'm committed to doing that. People comment in relation to my concern about audiences. I think, if you have quality programming, you want audiences to see it. You don't take nearly $750 million from the government a year and not expect to actually produce programming which people want.
Well, you would have said 9 months ago when you appointed Gail Jarvis the same things, that she was a quality appointment too.
Absolutely, and Kerry, I wanted Gail Jarvis to be successful. I'm disappointed at the end of the day Gail didn't work out, but there was no intention by either of us not to make a success of it.
You said when you took this job you would increase the ratings of ABC television. The ratings have dropped. Do you take responsibility for that?
Well, I take responsibility. Everything happens at the ABC, Kerry, and I'm obviously working in a broadcaster where 1 or 2 people leave. I nevertheless appear on that broadcaster myself and indicate that I'm happy to answer questions. In most media companies that doesn't happen, and that's the strength of the ABC.
Do you take responsibility for the drop in ratings?
Well, first of all, let's be clear about the ratings. There hasn't been the drop that's been suggested in either the Fairfax press or the Murdoch press. The reality is, if you look at household ratings year on year, there hasn't been much change until the arrival of Big Brother some 2 months ago, and that's the sort of programming we're not going to get into. So at the end of the day, we have to accept if reality programming sits on the commercial broadcasters and gets abnormally high audiences, it will affect the ABC.
Well, I've looked at their audiences. They don't appear to be abnormally high. And are you seriously suggesting that the slump in ABC ratings is due to Big Brother?
I'm not suggesting it's down to one program, and I'm not suggesting that we haven't had a slump. What I'm suggesting to you is if you look at the year-on-year household figures, the facts are there's not been a significant drop.
Well, I've looked, in fact, at the figures for the last week in May of last year compared to the most recent ones here.
You can't compare 1 week against 1 week.
Well, what I was going to say is that on that comparison it's dropped from 15, this is the audience share, it's dropped from 15.3% down to 12.6%, which is nearly a 20% drop. But if you think that's irrelevant, what about the fact that since the beginning of this year to now, they have dropped from 18% audience share down to 12.6% audience share?
Well, Kerry, if I may say, that's laughable because the ABC hasn't had an 18 share for ages. The fact is, 18 was occurred in an early part of January when the commercial broadcasters don't record the ratings.
Well, when was the last time the ABC had an audience share of 12.6, as low as 12.6?
Well, it's rather interesting. If you read the history, I remember a lovely discussion that took place in 1965 by the commissioners of the ABC prior to the corporation being established. And they were complaining because the share was down at 6.5.
That's a long time ago.
Well,
when was the last time you can remember the ABC ratings being down to 12.6?
Gary, what I'm saying is it's a long time ago, but the interesting discussion then was that if you get too low a figure, you have to justify how the public broadcaster can have the support that it needs to in funding.
But the point is, you're the one who made ratings a measure of the ABC's success and presumably your success. I can tell you on my own research that the last time the ABC recorded 12.6 that I've been able to find was 1991, 10 years ago.
Well, I mean, that's interesting because that must be almost the same time as David Hill said that he wanted to achieve a 20% share, so there's a bit of inconsistency there. I mean, the only reason 20% has ever been mentioned was that David actually said he'd aspire to achieving that share. I think it's an admirable thing to aim at. I think it's desirable to have a target. But look, what we're interested about is providing a range of programming for all people. Let's not get fixated just on the question of audience share. The reason we want audience share is that we're producing programs different to that the commercial broadcasters provide.
Well, let's talk about what you're producing.
A range of programming, and it's desirable that range of programming gets seen by as many people as possible.
Well, let me point to just one example of how the result of your management is perceived by the media. The Melbourne Herald Sun headlines a week or so ago, "A National Catastrophe," subheaded, "A Ratings Disaster and Programming Mystery." They paint a picture of poor ratings for local product, apart from news and current affairs, propped up by foreign drama and comedy, much of it repeats. I would suggest that that article would appear to mirror a great deal of public concern about the state of the ABC.
Well,
so it's not just about ratings, is it?
Kerry, I don't try to lose too much sleep about the press. You know, the press are not the friends of the ABC. The press are not interested in the success of the ABC.
What about the public?
When we talk about audience share, let's be clear. The ABC News most nights gets the sort of share I'm aspiring for the entire station to get. Even your show occasionally gets that share. So quite frankly, I don't think it's unreasonable to aspire as a target to achieve a 20% share. I made it clear that it was an aspiration. I made it clear it may not happen before I've finished my term of office, but we ought to have a target name for it.
But can you nominate a local drama product in the ABC, an Australian product, that rates into double figures? It would seem that you're relying on overseas product to prop up your ratings. Well, much of it repeats.
Well, you're asking the question in the context of a day when we've just appointed a seriously successful Australian drama producer. I know that we're going to have a number of programs because we've discussed them because she's been Director of Development for 4 months. We've been discussing how to refresh the schedule for 4 months, and we will be having, for example, a weekly drama series, which I think will be, a great hit.
But she comes in place of a head of television you appointed only 9 months ago, who has now seen fit to resign, and she comes from a job, this is Sandra Levy, comes from a job that she filled after you sacked her predecessor after only a few months.
Well, Kerry, as I say, it's probably only at the national broadcaster that we'll be having a debate about a member of staff leaving in a senior position. I mean, it happens in every...
About a number of members. Since you came to the ABC as a new broom, many managers have been shown the door. You have, as I've said, handpicked your 12 most senior directors. Even if some of them were there beforehand, it was your choice to deliberately keep them there. In 9 months, 5 of them have already gone. What does that say? That's 5 out of 12 of your most senior managers in 9 months.
What does that say about... 2 out of 13, actually.
What does that say about your capacity?
It's actually 2 out of 13 because I've made the point. If I don't come in and ask everybody to leave on the first day because I want to establish whether each of those people can contribute, if I make some decision down the road in relation to someone, I will. We've promoted people. Your own Director of News and Current Affairs was already in the ABC. I promoted him. The idea that I've brought all these people in from outside...
No, I didn't say you'd brought them all in from outside. I said you made a personal choice to either appoint people to jobs or keep them in those jobs.
Kerry, do you want me to admit that I made a mistake in appointing someone?
I'm suggesting to you that to lose 5 out of your top 12 managers...
I didn't lose 5, Kerry. I mean,
you sacked one, 4 resigned.
Well, I'm not going to discuss the individual circumstances of how people leave. The fact is, one's trying to move the corporation forward. We have 4,200 people. Kerry, if 10% of our staff changed, if 10% changed...
I'm talking about key positions. You also handpicked the English drama producer Tony Virgo against the advice of your head of television, Gail Jarvis, your then head of television, Gail Jarvis. He only lasted a few months before he resigned. Now Jarvis herself is gone. How can you possibly run a motivated and productive public broadcaster against that background of instability?
Well, Kerry, I think you'll just have to watch. I think you'll just have to watch what we achieve. Well, I mean, I think that if you watch us for the next year, you will see a significant improvement. I mean, the corporation is in need to be revitalised. There's no question about that.
But I'll come back to the question. How long do you need to demonstrate to the public that you can actually do that,
Well, the
that
board-
you're right in your decisions?
Well, the board has given me 5 years from when I started to do it. I have to achieve it as soon as possible. There are a lot of people working with me who are extremely satisfied with what they're being achieving. And I think that to suggest that one or two people leaving is actually, at the end of the day, the key issue is not the key
But
issue.
again, we're not talking about one or two, and we're talking about senior strategic positions. It sounds like there's been quite serious conflict between you and Gail
Well, you say
Jarvis.
sounds like, Kerry.
Well,
It's
it seems like, it does seem an open secret that she was unhappy with what she saw as your obsession with ratings.
Well, I mean, let's put it that way. We didn't have that discussion.
You've never had a discussion.
We've never had a discussion about my obsession with ratings. I've never had that discussion with Gail Jarvis.
Would it surprise you if there is a view that emerges from your weekly content meetings that you seem to have an obsession with ratings, that you are talking constantly about ratings and the need to get them up?
Well, with respect, we discuss ratings weekly because we have a report at the beginning that tells us how the shows are performing. By definition, we discuss that. When the numbers look good, the first thing one wants to do is praise and be pleased. I mean, what is wrong with aiming to get more people and a bigger audience for the public broadcast?
I guess it depends what width and at what cost. You, for instance, you wanted an Australian version of the British quiz show, The Weakest Link. Gail Jarvis apparently opposed it as being unsuitable for the public broadcaster, a quiz show based on humiliating people. What's the virtue in that program?
Well, Kerry, first of all, that program went to Channel 7. I think it must be 7 months ago. So, I mean, it's hardly newsworthy. The discussion, if I remember, lasted a couple of minutes.
That's the only discussion you had with Gail Jarvis about
in relation to
that
the
quiz show?
weakest link, absolutely. We've discussed the weakest link perhaps once or twice. We've never discussed it, once we'd lost it, there was no point in discussing it.
But again, I'll ask you, what was the virtue in a show that's based on humiliating people?
Well, two things. One, let's be clear. One, it is a public broadcaster produced program. It was produced by the BBC.
Yes.
Two, we have an arrangement with the BBC, and normally we would consider one of those programs as to whether it was appropriate for us. We would not have produced the program that currently sits on Channel 7. It would have been a different type of program. We wanted to buy the format. That would have meant if we'd had the format, we could have produced a different type of program for an ABC broadcaster, and we would deny Channel 7 having a program which currently at the moment is taking a lot of audience away from the ABC.
There's a recurring theme that comes from within the ranks of your senior managers about your management style. Lines like erratic, irrational, bullying, humiliates people. One who has gone on the record is former business development manager Michelle Dunstan, hired by you, not to be confused with Guy Dunstan, who you sacked. Michelle Dunstan resigned last month and says, quote, he would systematically pick on somebody and humiliate them ritually until they just withered away. That's not a very flattering image of good management, is it?
Of course, I would question whether that is correct, but all I would say is Sandra Levy is a very brave woman because she's been working with me for 4 months. She's seen me in most situations and she's decided to take on the job of Director of Television. I mean, I would refute entirely what somebody might say after the event when they leave the corporation in circumstances which are regrettable in many cases. I would prefer that I always made the right appointments, but we're in a very public position. Look, the ABC is not for the faint-hearted. We're in a very competitive environment. Channel 7, Channel 9 have never been more competitive than the ABC. The mere fact that we want to be successful is not something that they're going to step aside and allow to happen.
So anyone who leaves, like Gail Jarvis, is just faint-hearted? That's what it comes down to?
I'm not commenting on anyone who leaves, but what I'm concerned about is in Australia at the moment, we have full-blown American television onto which is grafted a small, underfunded public broadcaster. And I'm determined that that public broadcaster is able to push its weight in the future and make sure that the people of Australia are better informed, better educated and better entertained than they would be without us.
Jonathan Shier, we're out of time. Thanks for talking with us.
Thank you, Kerry.
And that's the program for tonight. We'll be back at the same time.